Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
It is set up for you.
Right. So let's get going then.
Okay.
Yes, I'm hoping it'll work now. And it doesn't seem to want to. Oh, here we go. Right, everybody see that?
Yes.
Good. Okay, right. I think it was actually over a year ago when Emilio first asked me if I'd do a presentation to the club. And at that time, I'd expected to be with you in Touré and showing you some prints, because that's really my end point of my photography, is to produce a print. And I've not been able to do that for some time for obvious reasons. And then this presentation morphed into minimalism in monochrome. So I thought two things. One was an original thought anyway, that there's some of you who may not know too much about me, so I'll try and explain a bit as we go along. And the other is, I have no idea what minimalism is. But, like everybody, I looked on Wikipedia to find out what it's about and various other sources. And a lot of them talk about it being simplicity or even extreme simplicity. The phrase less is more comes out quite often. And there's another one which is avoid distractions. So I've put avoid distractions right down in the bottom right hand corner of this picture, so it's not a distraction. And one of these distractions it says you must avoid is colour. And that suits me entirely, because I'd like to work in black and white. I do colour occasionally, but black and white is where my heart is, and I do find colour quite a distraction in photographs. So this is a typical example, this piece of grass set amongst other grasses, bits of barley as well. The whole picture is very green and all the greens fade together, but by converting this to monochrome, I can make out that piece of grass stand out from the rest. What I should also say is, if anybody wants to chip in with any comments and questions as we go through, then please feel free to do so. Another way of avoiding distractions, or the distraction of colour, is not to have any colour in the picture to start with. So this is from a holiday we had in Fuerteventura. And when we arrived at the hotel, walked out on the balcony, we were greeted with lovely sunshine, which was good because we'd left the UK in really bad weather. So we had nice sunshine, white walls, white patio furniture, and some shadows. And what I'd like to do, one of the things I like to do, is to put images together into panels or sets of images, anywhere from 2 upwards. So I did 3 pictures that I felt fitted together in terms of the content and the way that I processed them, to just give me a nice reminder of what it felt like when I walked out onto that patio, having arrived in Coralejo. And if I was able to show you prints, then you'd see on the display board something like this, 3 prints set together like that. So what I'm after really when I do this is a nice flow through from the pictures, from the left hand side to the middle, from the right hand side to the middle, relationship between the subjects, and a little bit of a story going on there rather than a single image. I used to do a lot of competition photography back in the late 80s, early 90s, and I really got bored with it because I felt that the pictures that were successful were all produced to a certain formula, and they didn't actually say anything. They weren't pictures you'd want to put on your wall or keep for any length of time. So what I'm trying to do, instead of producing a picture that'll find favour with the judge, is produce something that's a bit more meaningful and tells more of a story. And as well as having light against light, you can have light against dark or dark against light. I remember years ago seeing a black and white print presentation, and the person doing it said that black and white, the secret of successful black and white photography is to set light against dark and dark against light. And he then showed us his successful black and white photography, which was largely having gone around Yosemite standing in Ansel Adams tripod holes. So he seemed to miss that point. Anyway, poppies. And this is a good thing for me with black and white, is that you can take a red poppy or more than one red poppy and turn them white simply by processing the way you process them in Photoshop. And then again, if I was showing these as prints, you'd see something like this on the display board as two together. So apart from the next picture, you're not really going to see any more than that, although all the pictures are arranged to be together either in pairs or larger groups. So maybe you'll just have to use your imagination a bit with that. But the next one I want to show you is this. One of the things I like to do, as well as producing these pictures in panels, is to challenge myself. And a couple of years ago, I was getting a bit fed up and wondering what I could do for a challenge. So I did a lot of searching on the internet and decided to join the Photographic Society of America. Now, the reason for doing that was because, similar to the Royal Photographic Society here in the UK, the PSA offers what they call portfolio distinctions. And they have 3 levels, starting at bronze, going through silver to gold. And to achieve each level, you have to produce a body of work of a set number of pictures. They have to be put together in a panel that shows some flow through, some relationship between all the pictures. And you also have to produce a statement of intent, which is a maximum of 75 words, which tells the assessors what you intended to achieve with your panel of pictures. So a couple of years ago, 2019, I did the bronze award. You have to start at bronze, whatever your level of proficiency. So I did that in 2019, which was 10 pictures. And last year during lockdown, I decided to make this a project to keep me sane and produce a panel for the silver award. So this is the one I submitted last August time, and I found out in October it had been successful. So there's 15 pictures. I called this Wabi Sabi and COVID-19, and I wasn't sure if any of the assessors would know what Wabi Sabi is or had heard of it. So I decided in my statement of intent to include a little quote from Wikipedia, which is that Wabi Sabi is beauty that is imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. And I then went on that COVID-19 brings isolation, limitations, and death. This panel brings together those elements. Lens distortions are used to suggest the non-normality of our times. Darkness represents the effects of COVID-19. Light areas offer hope for the future. The detail in the plants echo the shape of the virus. The dead and dying plants hint at our own mortality, whilst their shapes provide an imperfect, impermanent beauty. So welcome to my world. As you can see, it's not always the brightest place to be. But that statement of intent is read out to the assessors as they're looking at this image. This is called the overview image. So as well as 15 images, you have to produce this image, which is limited by size. So you can't have it above a certain size. You have to fit all the images onto it, and you're not allowed to waste any space. So it's exercises the brain somewhat, and then the assessors will go through and look at each image separately and decide if they're up to the standard that they're looking for. So these images were produced with a Lensbaby Velvet 56 lens. Now, I don't know how many of you ever heard of Lensbaby lenses, but they're made and sold. Their unique selling point is that they cause distortions, and with this particular one, the Velvet 56, the 56 refers to the focal length. The Velvet refers to the fact that at wide apertures, you get this dreamlike quality to them. It's a totally manual lens, so some of us in the group will be comfortable with that. Others may not. It has no electronic linkages to the camera, so although it obviously fits on my camera, there is no information going from the lens to the camera to tell me what aperture I've got or to suggest what shutter speed I should be using. So everything has to be set totally manually. It has to be focused manually, and it can be quite demanding, and it took me a long time to get to grips with it. But you can see the effects that it has. Some of you may see the out of focus highlights, the circles there are reminiscent of a mirror lens, but it's not a mirror lens. It's just the way the lens is made. If you stop it down to about f8, then it's just acts like a normal lens, and you lose these dreamlike qualities to it. The idea with this group of pictures was to set light areas against dark shadow backgrounds, and then in the processing I've enhanced that contrast, so I've darkened down the backgrounds quite a bit and just chose one bright point to suggest that light at the end of the tunnel that we're all hoping that at least the vaccine will take us towards in getting rid of COVID. Normally, when you decide to do these sort of panels, whether it's the PSA or the Royal Photographic Society, the RPS, the experts, the advisors will tell you that you need to work on them over time. The idea is, they all say, to write your statement of intent at the start, then go out and take the pictures, produce many more than you need, keep reducing them down and building them back up until you've got the very best that you can. Me being me, I took these pictures in about a 10 to 15 minute burst of energy, which is quite often the way that I work. Sometimes, and you'll see some as well today, that I do take pictures over a longer period of time and then go back and put them together. But when I'm doing something like this, have an idea in my head, the light was right, the contrast was right, then I take a lot of pictures and try to work on put the panel together like that. Other times I'll take different pictures in different places, or just look through pictures and realize that there's a bit of a theme going on. But with these, it was a, say, 10 to 15 minute burst of energy because the light was just how I wanted it. And that one, I think, is the last one. So that was the 15. That went in, as I say, in the August. The information from the PSA was that the closing date was the 31st of October. So I sent it in, tried to forget about it, and then it was about the middle of October I got notice that it'd been successful. So that was very pleasing, and now means I've got a problem of what I'm going to do next. So now for something completely different. So this is carrying on the idea of using black backgrounds and bits of light just to emphasize certain bits. This is in the studio in Mahaka. This is Christina, who was one of Stan's models, and we photographed her 3 times, I think it was. And she's a very attractive young lady. She's very, very nice person. She really is a smashing person. But as a photographic model, she left a little bit to be desired, because while she would quite happily do the things you were directing her to do, she didn't come up with any ideas of her own. And so she could be a little bit hard work at times. But this time I'd got this idea for a photo with a black background and just the light skimming her side, just to bring out the shapes, and she was quite happy to go for that. On another occasion, this is Phoebe, and we're doing the same sort of thing again in the studio. We're trying to get something a little bit different, although basically it's the same photograph as the one you saw with Christina. And if you can't get in the studio, or you haven't got models and you're not comfortable playing about with the lights, all you need to do is to put a piece of black card behind your kitchen tap, and you can still get a photograph. And I was quite liked the fact that we got the edges of the water and a nice line down the middle catching the light in the kitchen for this one. And, we've got some now where we've got white backgrounds, and I've done these in different ways to get the white background. This one I bought a light pad during lockdown off Amazon, and you can get these in different sizes. I decided to go for an A3 one, which cost about £40 sterling, so around about 50 euros, I guess. And it's LED lights, so you don't get any problems with colour, I don't think, in that respect. And it's big enough to put some flowers on and play about with them. This one is a little bit older. I had a period when I was out walking my dog of picking up leaves that had fallen, dead leaves, and putting them, I think, on a piece of white card just lying on the floor, camera on a tripod, and take the picture. This one is at Trevor will know the place, I think, Pleasley Pit. This is a couple of miles from where I live now. It's an old coal mine, but it's been turned into a nature reserve, and it's got walks around it. So this was, I think, winter last year when we had a bit of snow, and I had a wander around there, and I quite liked the circle that had been formed around this little bit of grass. And because it was winter and the sun doesn't get up very high, we're still getting a bit of detail out of the snow. And a fork. This was, well, it's in the apartment in Spain, but I just put the fork on a piece of A4 copy paper, take it out the printer, lie it on the table up against a box, I think it was, to get a curl on the paper so that there's no lines in the background, and then just shoot wide open and process it so that there's a little bit of detail in there. This is about getting the whites right in the background, but also getting the darker areas correct as well to give the contrast and shape. And if you haven't got a fork, a spaghetti spoon will do. So you can see a bit of the roof of the apartment in there. So I prefer the fork because this has got too many things happening in the reflections for me. Sycamore seeds, again, picked up on a dog walk. But I like the shape, and I like the fact that we've got the little one there just to the right of the big one to, I think, add a bit more interest to it. And another dead leaf, which I think really at the time that I was doing these represented how I was feeling, because I'd just been through, just completed treatment, which thankfully was successful for prostate cancer. So I was feeling a bit battered and a bit bruised and a bit old and a bit curling up at the edges and all that sort of thing. So I saw this leaf and I thought, well, it looks how I feel. So I thought I'd photograph that as well. And I think this is the final one of this set, which is a tulip back on the light pad again. And one of the things I like about the development of Photoshop, and I presume it's in Lightroom as well, is that they've added a texture slider to it as well. So you can slide that and bring out more of the texture in your subject. which I think worked well with the petals of this particular tulip. Okay, so they were light backgrounds, now some dark backgrounds. I'm sure most of you will know where this is on the coast, just outside Villaricos. And I used to go there very frequently when we were in Spain to take the dog out for a walk. And I was interested one day we went down there, or this particular day we went down there, that somebody had seemed to be starting to put a roof on the place. And what interests me, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but right in the middle of the roof, we got a crucifix shape, which I thought was fitting because I think this is an old chapel from the community that used to be there. This is shot, some of you will have noticed, in infrared. I had an infrared at the time. I was using a small compact camera, 8 megapixel, that had been converted to infrared just to give me straight black and white. So it could at times have a bit of a job to control the contrast. But, it was totally automatic. It was one John Michael would have loved because it was auto only and JPEG only, which John always used to say that he used. But it was useful at the time. But I've moved on to better things in terms of an infrared camera these days. Again, this one was a part of a series I did. When I was going through my treatment for prostate cancer, I suddenly found myself visiting cemeteries and graveyards to photograph. So I don't know if that's some sort of subconscious link between what was happening with my health at the time. But I'd started to notice, I hadn't really realized this, but probably because I'd never looked for it, but I started to notice these military gravestones in cemeteries in the UK. I'd seen them in France, but I'd not seen them in the UK. So I started to look a bit closer. And this one I thought was very poignant and very sad. Not only had we got this very young man, 22 years of age, when he died as a result of the war, but the date of his death was the date the armistice was signed to end the fighting. This one was a bit of a happy one. This was a trip down to Almeria, which I found, certainly the area we visited, very difficult to photograph. I didn't see an awful lot that inspired me. But this water in the fountain shooting up against a shadow background caught my eye. And this, if I remember rightly, is the church in Níjar, where we visited one day. I can't remember. There was a few of us used to go out once a week. Howard, Dave, when he was living locally, Emilio, John, myself, and we go around different villages to photograph. And what I liked and what struck me when I walked inside this church was I'd walked out of very bright sunlight into this dark interior, and there was just this bit of very bright light coming through the window. So that's what I wanted to show. I'm sure judges would be upset about the fact that there are white areas here with no information in them whatsoever. But that's exactly how I wanted it, because that's how it felt to me when I walked in. Until my eyes adjusted, my immediate reaction to this was, wow, you know, there's a lot of light coming through that window, and that's what I wanted to convey. It's not about photographing a church interior and showing all the detail. It's about showing the effect of light as soon as you walk in. And this one, I have no idea what it's about, to be honest with you. I can't even remember where we were. We're wandering around some village, and I just happened to see these. And I think the thing that popped into my mind was the sort of childhood game of paper, rock, scissors. And I just got this imagination that this piece of material hanging there is to wrap up the rock. And why anybody would do that, I don't know. But there just seemed to be such a strange pairing, and yet somehow or other have a connection between them. Maybe that's just the way my head works. The circles, I like circles. A friend of mine visits the Hebrides as often as he can, 2 or 3 times a year. And we were at their place one day. I think he got a barbecue going on, and I noticed this bottle of Isle of Harris gin, and I liked the bottle. So when it was empty, he gave me the bottle. But one day I was looking for photos, and I just looked at the top of this and saw all these circles. So we've got a round top, we've got the O in the word off a couple of times, we've got O in Outer Hebrides, we've got the circle for the degrees. So there seem to be lots of circles going on here. So I put them on a not quite circular drinks coaster. And although you can't see it because I've cut the edges off, the background is a circular slate plate setting. This is in the Sierra Lucar somewhere. We were out photographing one day. We wandered off into the mountains and came across this little hamlet where there were about 2 farmhouses, and set away from them was this little church. And again, this is the infrared. The good thing about infrared, if anybody doesn't know, is that it will turn blue skies black. This will turn green foliage white, so you get instant contrast. And I love contrast. What it will do as well, what it does on film, is give you quite a lot of grain as well. And what the little 8 megapixel camera can do as well is give you a lot of grain, sometimes too much of it. But I quite like grain, so I'm not too bothered about that. And most of you will probably recognize this. This is the bridge at Valencia, whose name I can never remember. Is it Osset Delor or something like that? It's the one near the City of Arts and Sciences anyway. So and I was just again struck by the fact that there are some very strong diagonal shapes in this, and I knew that I could turn the blue sky or turn the blue sky black through processing. Dark against light this time, and a set of trees. This is in the village where I now live. Foggy winter's day, as you can see, and taking the dog for a walk in the park and just looking for really atmospheric pictures, shapes. I like the way we got this line of trees, and I don't know if you can see in the background that there is somebody just walking past. You can just make them out once you see them. So some more foggy wintry trees. This one is, I think, in the same park, different day because we've got snow on the ground. But it's about trying to just bring out shapes and mood, atmosphere, capturing the conditions, conveying the conditions to make you feel as though you were there. Because I'm sure while you were basking in the 18-degree warmth of sunny Spain, that you're really dying to get back to the UK to experience some nice cold weather. Again, different park, different day, same sort of conditions. I like the shape of the tree. I think the good thing about trees in winter is that the shapes look so much better than they do when they've got the foliage on them. And this one, I felt that the real addition to this that helps to make the photograph is that bench beside it. If it was just the tree, I don't think the image would be quite as interesting. One of my favorite photographers is Michael Kenner. And this is, well, I won't say it's the sort of thing Michael Kenner does. This was inspired by Michael Kenner's work. And he does do some high contrast work. He does do quite a lot of trees. And he has interesting titles. So if this was Michael Kenner's, he'd probably call it something like 13 Trees. which means that you spend your time then looking throughout the photograph, counting up the number of trees that you can see. So instead of just glancing at the photograph and moving on to the next one, you actually spend time looking into it and seeing what's in there, and picking up the relationships between all the different aspects, which I think is a great idea. So one day I might sit down and count the number of trees in this. And again, another one. So again, if I was able to do this, I'd be showing you these as prints. So there'd be a relationship between this photograph and the first one I showed you, because it's a similar sort of shaped trees, similar arrangement, same sort of idea of leading the eye into the background. And again, this one would I think fit with the first snowy one that I showed you. Again, similar sort of shapes to the trees. So this is what I'm doing in putting these photographs together, is looking for similarities there where images relate to each other, whether that's the shape of the objects in them, the conditions, whatever it might be. And placing some objects on the left, placing some objects on the right, so that I get those parts of the panel that lead the eye where I want it to go. Okay, so lockdown last year now, we were permitted, the government very kindly permitted us to have an hour's exercise every day. Quite how they could police that, given that we're short of police officers, I don't know. But anyway, most people at the start seemed to abide by it. And they didn't say that when we took our hour's exercise, like you couldn't take a camera with you. So I wandered off out into the local fields with my camera and ended up buying some equipment, such as another macro lens and a tripod. And because of my age, and crouching down to photograph grasses was quite easy, getting up again was more difficult. I bought a little camping stool to sit on as well, so I could sit there and look properly and see where the photographs were. So I just like, again, these grasses crossing over each other against a dark background. Very simple images, but it's avoiding all the distractions. This I don't know if you can see that, but this piece of grass in the background on the left that you can make out there was quite bright, so I had to darken that down a lot to avoid that being a distraction in the background. And then I've cropped it to this nice letterbox, vertical letterbox shape, which Tim Clinch would not like at all. Simply again to avoid distractions that were on the right hand side, and to try to center the grasses, which were a little bit too far left for me. And daisies, very tall daisies, so they're probably not called daisies at all, but I have to apologize for all the nature lovers today for not knowing the names of anything at all that I'm about to show you. I look at them for their photographic merit, not for their names, but I do understand why people like to know the names of them. I just like the way that over the time that this had been growing and living in the grasses in the park, that somehow or other it got very dirty, and maybe it's just discoloration as the plant dies off, but I like the way the petals curled around as though they're curling back up into a fetal position, and it's looks as though it's lived a long and busy life. Whereas this one, still growing, still commanding attention. I love the way with the stems start to have a curve in them as well. That really does attract me, and I think we got one in the background that's seen better days as well. So there's two stages of the life cycle. which, having listened to natural history judges over the years, is something that you should be looking for in your photographs if you're doing nature. It's something about life cycles and lifestyles. And this one set against a nice dark background again, as you can see. And it is what it is. There's not an awful lot to say about it. It's a very simple photograph, but then in minimalism, simplicity is to be applauded. So look for simple photographs and set light against dark. You can't go wrong. All the experts say so. I have no idea what these are. I thought these would be clover, but they're very, very tall, far too tall for clover, so I don't know what they are. I'm sure there's somebody who knows, but it's not me. And I'm sorry to upset again the nature people amongst us, but quite honestly, I can't be bothered to look up what it is, because what I'm after is a photograph that has a little bit of impact, has interest. Hence having two of them there growing close together. And this one, I've no idea what it is at all either. It seems to have curled itself into a ball.
This one's called a Queen Anne's lace. We got a lot. We have
lace. Oh right.
Queen Anne's lace. We have a lot of them in Ibiza.
Do you? Right. Thanks, Chich. I'm going to write that down because otherwise I'll forget it. Queen
Anne's lace. When they're open, like the one that's out of focus in the background, they're white, or they can be white or pink. And they have one little black dot in the middle, which is supposed to be, the name comes from Queen Anne pricking herself when she was crocheting, and it's a bit of blood, apparently.
Well, that's fascinating.
That's the only one I know.
Right. Well, thanks for that, because I didn't know that, and that's a really interesting story. So that starts to conjure up other possibilities in my mind about them. So I now need to find out when they're growing again. Obviously not this time of year here, but
later, spring.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's great. Thanks very much. And this is my nature picture. This is my bird photography. It's not quite the same as Dave's bird photography.
All right.
I didn't have to erect a hide. I didn't have to sit in it for hours on end waiting for the birds to come and be where I want them to be. You just turn up in an industrial part of Sheffield and there's the bird coughing away on the rooftop. No, I don't think they're doing that because of the Clean Air Act. But again, for me, you see, without the bird, this photograph would be nowhere near as interesting. I probably wouldn't even be showing it. I like all the bottom bit around the Globe Steelworks and the sort of decay that's going on around there, because that could say things about the industry and the economy and so on. But what I really, really like is the bird sitting on the rooftop. And this one, I think, is near Alphax, if I've pronounced that correctly. I don't know if Trevor knows that or whether I've misremembered, but I like the shape of the building itself, and of course, in terms of contrast, the light against dark, but again, with the crucifix as well, and got dark against light, so it works both ways. And what I wanted to do here, darken the top down, the clouds down, to add to the atmosphere, but also to contain the viewer's eye where I want it to be. So if you notice as you look around this, not just the top is dark, but there's darkening around the edges and the bottom as well. And this is an old black and white print and trick that you print in the edges of your picture, and it helps to concentrate the viewer's attention where you want it to be, rather than their eyes wandering out of the side of the picture. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that there were a group of us wandering off once a week to go around all the different villages. So this set of pictures is all from the villages, and some of these pictures are ones that got John Michael very excited on my behalf, that he thought was some of the, or probably the best black and white I'd ever produced. because for John, they were producing strong graphic pictures. What I was trying to do in doing these pictures was find something that was find something that was worth photographing, but something that was remarkable, and turn something that was very ordinary into something that was worth looking at. If you wander around the villages as we do on a weekday, in the middle of the day, there's hardly anybody about, so you've got to try and find something to photograph. This particular day, I decided to photograph these steps and railings like this going down. And this is one that John really told me I'd got wrong, and that I needed to flip this picture so that the stairs were going up, because what I'd got here, as John told us, and as I'm sure has told many of you as well, we read left to right in the Western world. So here the eye goes from the top down and out of the picture. So the journey that the eye goes on with this picture is one where it takes you out of the picture, where if I'd flipped it, then the journey would be going up into the picture. And I tried that, and I could see what he was talking about. That seemed to make a bit of sense. But then he said what I then needed to do was to add to it somebody who was wearing red shoes walking up the steps. And I thought, well, yes, you would say that, John, and that makes it a John Michael picture, not a Rob Palmer picture. So I decided to keep it like this, because whilst accepting, excuse me, that the eye does go on this journey down and out of the picture, I think that creates more dynamic tension than the eye making an easy journey of going up into the picture. Am I right? Who knows? But this next picture, you can see that the eye travels up into the picture, and is I think, an easier journey for the eye to make. And as a result, we probably feel more comfortable with it. Not that I want to denigrate this picture, because this is one of my favorite pictures. I like the fact that we got this simplicity again, just the light or the dark against the light. But I like the fact we do go on this journey, but this journey is broken a little bit. And although we can make the leap across that gap, we still notice that the two railings are not quite in sync. One is not quite at the same level as the other. So that difference, I think, just helps to introduce a bit of tension into the picture, which I think makes it more interesting. This one again, I'm really fascinated by many of the windows that you can find in the little villages. I was born and brought up in a farming community in South Lincolnshire in the UK, and I was quite used to seeing farmers use things, recycle things really, from their original use into something else. And I'm fascinated to see that similar things happen with windows in the villages in Spain. Excuse me. So this window caught my eye because, again, of what's in there, and the fact that we've got some contrast. There's a nice dark interior against the white wall. But I like the flowers, or the flower, growing at the bottom there. So again, putting that there makes a nice diagonal and foil for the window. Judges will tell us we shouldn't have two things in a photograph, two different things, because the eye keeps bouncing from one to the other. But that's exactly what I want your eye to do. I want it to bounce from one to the other, because I want you to see both of those and make a link between them. This one, I couldn't not photograph this, because this is almost like some abstract modern art installation here in this window. I just find it fascinating. I could look at that for ages. I'm not sure whether anybody else can, and I'm not going to force you into doing that. You'll be pleased to know, but it just fascinates me, and the longer I look at it, the more I see different shapes in there. And this one looks as though somebody had a collection of old bedsteads or maybe it was just one bedstead that they were able to cut up and put in the window. But again, just fascinating what they do. And recycling, people think recycling is something new, but it really isn't, I don't think. And I like this plant growing here as well. It's just, I just love it. I just love the fact that they've built a bit of wall around it, or maybe they built the bit of wall and then put the plant in. But somebody's, I think, has thought, well, I've either got a plant that can go there, or I need to build a bit of wall around that for it to grow in. And the bell, some of you may remember my picture from Vera Cemetery, for whom the bell tolls. Well, here's a bell on a wall outside somebody's house, and I don't know why. I'm not really bothered why, I just like the fact the bell is there next to the window. And a nice bit of plumber. A friend of mine who sadly died a few years ago was a plumber. So this is in memory of my friend Dennis, who would have been absolutely fascinated with this piece of plumbing. I'm sure he would have had a lot to say about it. And this one, I think, is again possibly at the end, or would have been at the end of the panel. So we've got one going up from, we had the stairs. You see, isn't it interesting? Because I saw the steps as going down from top left, and yet I see this one as going up from bottom right. So I don't know if anybody else reads that photograph in the same way as I'm doing. What I particularly like about this was the crack on the wall going pretty much straight up that I put on the third, so it commanded attention in the picture space. And the other bit I'm intrigued about is, again, I don't know if you can see it, but this bit of wall that's worn here, where we've got the diagonal line towards this bottom left-hand corner. And I'm fascinated to know what's been rubbing up against that at that angle for so long that it started to take some of the plaster off the wall. All sorts of stories going in my mind. Okay, so that was that was the villages. These are again, these are down at Vera Playa. I guess these are for lifeguards. I don't know. I've never seen anybody on them, but I've tended not to be in Spain during the high summer because it gets far too hot. So here's one, and here's another. And I like the shapes of them, to be honest with you. I think they make nice, strong shapes. Very simple shapes, but very interesting. And the boardwalks. And this day, or this morning, when I went down there with the dog, this was catching the light. So I processed this to emphasize the light. So this is a lot darker. I've darkened this down quite a lot, as you may imagine, looking at it, but it's, for me, all about the light hitting the boardwalk. That's what I saw, and that's what I wanted. And this one goes with it. So if you saw these together, you'd see similar shapes in the boardwalk and these shadows, one going from left to right and the other going from right to left. This is inside the theatre at Ercole Vera, where we visited a few times when we were trying to get an exhibition, and when we had an exhibition in there. It's a great place to have an exhibition. I don't know if they still do them. I'm sure they do, but it's a fantastic exhibition space. So I don't know whether Vera Club could get in there or not, but I know Emilio did a lot of work for us, and also Salvatore was very helpful as well. And back in the apartment again, I'm bored, I need to take some photographs. What can I do? I'll go back to circles, and I got this nice little live knife that I like the shape of, and again, put the knife on the plate, get instant contrast. And there we go, simple, avoiding distractions. But I put it with this one, which is pencil shaving. I think I got a pencil. I used to sit on the balcony in the mornings in Spain after breakfast and do a crossword to keep my brain busy. So I went in one day to sharpen the pencil, and for the first time ever, and the only time ever in my life, the shaving came out complete circle like this, more than once. So I again put them on a bit of white copy paper and photographed them before I broke them by handling them. A trip to Sawbass, and in one of the shops the guy was doing a pottery demonstration, so it was simply a matter of getting his hands and the pot whizzing round. And more hands, this time a man sitting in Mahaca Pueblo, just enjoying the sun and using the texture slider on this one in Photoshop to bring out some textures in his hands to make them look that little bit older.
Mm.
Right, this was, I said earlier, right at the start, that I tend to prefer working in sets of pictures rather than producing a single image that sums everything up. But having done it in camera clubs for several years, it can still, even now, even though I've not entered competitions for 30 years, it can still be difficult to get out of the habit of trying to sum everything up in a single picture. And I was out one day, my permitted walk, with the infrared camera with me. And this was just after lockdown was announced. And we've got near us, we've got this lovely area of green grass which I think is ideal for children to go and play, and where the local authority has put a sign up saying you can't do it. No ball games. You cannot go out there and run about with a ball. Presumably you can go out there and run about with drugs or something else. Being facetious. Presumably children can go out there and run about with something else, but you can't run about and kick a ball about while you're doing it. Which just seems very bizarre to me, but I thought the fact that there were no ball games and nobody about, nothing else about, fairly featureless area just summed up lockdown.
Rob,
sorry?
Rob, what sort of speed on the camera to take that with infrared?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think which camera I might have taken with it. I guess, well, it'd probably be round about 125th, but I'm guessing there.
Wow. Yeah.
If it's the infrared camera I've got now, I always set it to 5.6, so I use aperture priority and let the shutter speed find itself. But I mean, it was a bright enough day. You can't see any shadows, but it was a bright enough day. It was summertime, as you can see from the trees and shrubs in the background, so there'd have been plenty of light about.
Mm-hmm.
But it's yeah, it's a very small and light, compact camera, so you can hand hold it at very slow speeds anyway.
I used an infrared filter and
Oh yes,
used that.
yeah.
You're talking minutes. When I was
Yeah.
in Scotland, you could get a good reading off on about 20 seconds, but
Yes.
there's a lot more energy off the vegetation up there than there is in Spain. You know, there's a lot more rain, of course.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I've got one of those as well, Ashton, and I've not really used it in anger, to be honest with you, but I like the idea of having long exposure infrared, which I can't do with the compact camera.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, I think it's horses for courses. If you just want a camera to walk about with and take a few snaps as you're going around, then something like I've used here fits the bill. I think if you want something more serious to do more thoughtful work, then, you know, by all means use the filter with an SLR. But yeah, it's so that's fun. Yeah, so there's no ball games. Here's we've got the opposite tones. So instead of having black lettering against a white background, you can see what we got here. And I don't know if this presents a problem to everybody. I can read upside down. I was at work one day in a meeting, and I was sat opposite somebody, and I was reading what the piece of paper they got in front of them, and she said to me, "Are you reading that?" And I said, "Yes, I am." So she said, "So you can read upside down?" I said, "Yes, I can." And she said, "So can I, and you're the only other person I've met that's able to do it." And it's strange, isn't it, that things that we can just do and find ordinary, we expect everybody can do. So I don't know if we can read this, but if you can't, it says something in Russian at the top and then the word "on" at the bottom. No entry sign, and I just asked my wife Elaine to walk towards it because I knew she got her white trainers on and that her blue jeans light black. And it's a suggestion that she is going to break the rules. I just thought I could put that in barriers, couldn't I? So there you are, Dave. That's what you got to comment on this one if I put it in. No, I won't put it in. This is a shop window in Coraleco in Fuerteventura. And I just like the fact that here we seem to have this at the front was supposedly an enormous carrier bag, but I like the fact that we've got this handle of the bag seemingly joining the mannequins together. My friend Dennis, the plumber, told me that I should remove the reflections, the reflected heads in the background, but I think they help to add a great deal of depth to the picture, so I've left them. And here's a shopper who's standing still. So instead of a shop mannequin standing still, here's a woman in a shopping centre standing still. And I photographed her for about 5 minutes, and she was clearly waiting for someone. And I think this was towards the end of the sequence. She got fed up and got her phone out to find out where the other person was. Because it was slowish shutter speeds and not much light in there, we get a nice movement of people going all around it. This was the Goth event at Whitby, which happened at, well, it was happening at that time at twice a year. And I know
Bram Stoker.
Well, so Sarah went from the club one year, and she got some cracking pictures, much better than I did. But anyway, this guy was there with his battered top hat, looking out the left of the picture. And in Spain, this woman was walking by one day, one of the villages we're at. So she's going out of the picture as well, and I quite like that idea. It's going out of the picture. And this is where I have to boast and name drop, I'm afraid, but Tim Clinch has seen this and likened it to the work of Joseph Kudelka. So that's about as close to fame as I'm ever going to get, I think. But this was interesting because I was quite liking the building and the window, and was looking at that, and I saw this woman walking down the street, and I could see she was going to walk past me. So I waited until she got there and shot the picture. But she never made eye contact with me. She never acknowledged my presence whatsoever. And I used to have a dog that if he didn't want to notice you, he always looked the other way, because if he couldn't see you, then you didn't exist. And I felt that she's not acknowledging my presence, so I don't exist in her world. Okay. Bit of an old fence among some grasses again, infrared. And on the top of my stairs, another barrier, white against white. That's one of the things I like about digital. I suppose my heart still belongs to film in the darkroom, but I think my processing skills on digital are better than they ever were in the darkroom. And one of the things I like is how you can get nice white pictures. You can have white against white and you're still getting detail, which I always found difficult to do on film. But then again, I did always used to process my films to get maximum contrast out of them. And for those of you who went there, this is on the stairs in the house John Michael lived in. in Arboleus or outside Arboleus. And again, I just like that patch of light coming through there and the shapes of the vase and the stand. And this is in a hotel room, I think in the northeast of England, I think near Whitley Bay, that we went to, and I was surprised to see that the Gideons are still placing Bibles in hotel rooms, because you don't see that very often these days. So I thought, here are the two essentials of life for people who have to travel around in their job and they're staying in hotels most nights of the week. The two essentials are the Holy Bible placed by the Gideons and the remote control for the television. Perhaps for some it would be the remote control in the minibar, but the room didn't have a minibar in it, so I went for the holier option. Okay, more trees. I think this leads into the last set of trees. This one is why I like black and white, because I think this is much more expressive. This was taken in the middle of Spain when we were on the way back to the ferry one day. And in the middle of summer as well, or I think in June anyway. So we got white clouds against a blue sky. We've got a green tree, and the colour of the earth was red. So lots of colour in there, which is far too distracting for me, but I knew that I could get something with contrast in it. This one, I know Trevor's seen this one before, and I was in awe of his comment, because he told me pretty much where this was. I said I took this in Derbyshire, and I actually took this on slide film many years ago, and I didn't particularly know where I was at the time, and it was so long ago there's no chance of me remembering. And Trevor from the reservoir on the bottom right third was able to tell me which area I was in. And I just thought that was awesome. I was absolutely amazed at his knowledge of the Derbyshire countryside, that he could pinpoint that. So it's incredible. And I've never
to that, Rob, you see that peak on the left-hand side of this image?
Yes.
That is where my wife broke her ankle at the end of last year.
Is it? All right. Okay, so that's one been renamed Shirley's Fall, is it?
Exactly.
Shirley's Slip. I have an alliteration. Shirley's Slip.
Yeah. I'm afraid broke perhaps is an understatement. Smashed is more like it.
Oh dear. Oh dear. I might have to crop that off now you've told me that, Trevor. I don't want to be bringing back bad memories for people. Right, so I should have mentioned the blue sky in that one, which hasn't got there. This is the infrared from the infrared camera I now use, which is a Nikon compact J1 with interchangeable lenses. So I can take control of this camera and get it to do what I want it to do instead of it doing itself. And this is a view from the edge of the woods that we go and have a walk around occasionally across the local countryside. And I like the way these two trees are just dominating the building, when in reality the building is actually quite large. But it's the angle of view and of course the distance away. And I mentioned earlier about liking trees, the shape of trees in winter, because without the foliage. And here we've got a bit of foliage in, but the shape still comes out nicely, I think, on these trees. And this was one summer in England. As you can see, it's typical summer weather. But just another couple of trees, really, when out walking a dog. And I think these are the same trees that I've just shown you in infrared, the first one with the house, but from a different angle. And the difference, just to mention this technically, I don't know if anybody's into infrared, but the compact camera I first used that you saw earlier was calibrated for 820 nanometers to give just pure black and whites. This one is 720, so I could, if I wanted, produce colour infrared pictures from it. And I did once produce one, and I just couldn't see the point of doing it. But what it allows me to do is to have more contrast control. So it's much easier to control the contrast with the 720 than the 820. This is the one with the 820. The only way I could attempt to control the contrast was by taking or pointing the camera at something very light, pressing the shutter halfway down to lock the exposure, which also locked the focus as well, and then taking the picture. This one was slightly annoying because this is the curse of the compact camera. I was in bright sunshine. This is just outside Garucha. I was in bright sunshine and couldn't see the screen on the back of the camera very well, and that's the only thing that I had to aid the composition of the photograph. And what I did was slightly miss off the top of the cloud. I like that circular cloud, almost like a halo over the tree. So I could have, if I'd been able to see it, I could have moved the camera up slightly or step back a bit and get it all in, but I failed. And a couple of winter trees back in the UK. So you can see what I'm doing here with this set of pictures is putting light against dark and then dark against light. I'm not sure whether it's working doing it like this because your eyes are having to adjust from light to dark to light to dark all the time. It probably worked better as a set of prints. Again, I suppose this one was inspired by Ansel Adams and his silver birches or whatever, or aspens, or whatever it was he did, aspens. So just like the silver birch bark there, set against the darkness of the other trees. And this was on the road up to John Michael's house. Love the shape of the tree on this one as well. And this one, I think you were with us, Amelia. I think you probably were as well, Dave. This is where we went trespassing and got told off, photographing the almond trees wandering over somebody's land, and we got shouted at and told to clear off in no uncertain terms.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. Right, and this one, I think you were probably there for this one as well. We went to see Salvador's exhibition at the Casa de la Duendes at Puerto Lumbrero.
Yes.
And they got these lovely shuttered windows. So I played around with those for a little while and got some different pictures. So I've just got a set of 3 of those. Because I kept opening and closing different parts of the windows as well. But what I like the light seeping around the edges. It was all about that bit of light and the light and shade, and the shapes of the light coming in. So we're coming towards the end now, and if I'd been showing you prints as I'd hoped, but I know I keep banging on about that, but for me, the end point of my photography and the start point of my photography is to produce a print. So what I do with my photographs is geared up to producing a print, and that for me is the end point. But I appreciate I'm not able to do that, and I'm getting to grips with showing photographs this way. So I've pretty much played all my cards now. And people are leaving their seats, particularly this one that I saw as I was walking out of a pub we'd been to for something to eat. The meal was pretty horrible, but the saving grace was that there was this spotlit chair just there. I've not touched anything, I've not moved anything. This was near the entrance. Why it was just there like that, I don't know, but it was. So people are leaving the seats and they're making their way towards the exit. Long story behind this one, but basically on our way down to Palomares 1 year, the car broke down and we ended up having to stay overnight at a hotel, which was unexpected. And it took all day for the car to get fixed. And this was, I think, in the hotel we were staying in as we were finally leaving to go. We went up to the room to get our bags, and this guy was walking down the stairs on his way out. And that would be good night, except of course it's not good night, is it? It's good morning, good afternoon, maybe for some of you are, but we are. I'm tempted to say something about Boris Johnson and Operation Moonshot with this, but I'll not bother. I'll just leave it at that. So thank you all very much for coming along, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rob.
Thank you.
That was